The night was heavy with silence as I walked past the old playground, where my childhood torment still lived in memory. Ethan said, "You'll never escape me," his laughter echoing in my head even years later. I clenched my fists, remembering every bruise and every cruel word that carved my youth into fear. My heart pounded as the rusty swings creaked in the wind, each sound a ghost of the pain I endured. Tonight, though, was different. Tonight, I wasn't the broken kid anymore. Tonight I was the storm he never saw coming. The air was sharp with winter chill, but inside me burned a fire hotter than rage itself. I whispered into the night, "This ends where it began." When I was 12, Ethan ruled my world like a tyrant. His fists were his crown, and his laughter was the whip that broke me down. Teachers turned blind eyes, friends stayed silent, and my cries went unheard. Each day at school felt like walking into a battlefield, where the enemy always won. Ethan said, "You're nothing, James," words that still echo like a curse. I carried that poison into adulthood, the venom feeding my rage until it became part of my veins. But standing here now, I feel it shifting into something new. Not just anger, but a weapon forged in pain. The world never forgets the cruelty of children. It itches scars deeper than knives. I carried those scars hidden beneath polite smiles and empty laughter. But tonight, under this bitter sky, they bleed fresh. Ethan always thought he won, but he never knew I'd keep the memory alive, sharpening it into a blade. My revenge began the moment I decided to stop being afraid. Fear had shaped me into a shadow, but shadows learn patience. And patience is lethal when the storm finally arrives. The swing's creak was like a haunting lullaby, pulling me deeper into memory. Ethan's smirk was burned into my soul, a constant reminder that the world never protected me. But what he didn't know is that pain is a teacher. Every humiliation carved strength. Every bruise built armor. Tonight isn't about forgiveness. It's about balance. I want him to feel the helplessness he carved into me. I want him to know that prey grows teeth when pushed too far. I whispered his name into the night, testing how it felt on my tongue after years of silence. Ethan. The word itself was venom, heavy and bitter. I imagined his face when he saw me again. Older, stronger, no longer his victim. My chest tightened with a strange mix of fear and excitement. Was I prepared to face him? Or was I just feeding the fire that might consume me? Either way, the first step was taken. There was no turning back now. The morning sun pushed through my blinds in jagged lines, but it felt less like light and more like interrogation. I dragged myself into the bathroom, staring at a reflection I barely recognized. The cracks in the mirror split my face into fragments, each shard showing a version of me that Ethan had built. The weak boy, the angry teenager, the broken man. My fingers pressed into the sink until they ached. "This ends when I say it does," I whispered, the sound raw, almost alien. The water dripped from the faucet, steady like a clock, counting down. I realized revenge wasn't just a choice anymore. It was inevitable. The monster Ethan forged in me was finally awake. The old boxing gym smelled the same as it had a decade ago. Sweat, leather, and a faint sting of disinfectant that never masked the blood that once spilled here. Marcus stood in the corner, arms folded, gray stubble framing eyes that had seen too much. He studied me like a man already predicting the fall of another soul. "Revenge burns hotter than fire, James," he said, voice gravel heavy, "but when the fire fades, it leaves nothing but ash." His words stung because I knew they were true. But pain was all I had left. I wrapped the tape around my fists, each pull tighter, each knot a promise. "Then I'll shape those ashes into something he can choke on," I muttered. For a second, Marcus almost smiled, not pride but recognition. The knock on my door was soft, hesitant, but I knew it was her. Sarah stood in the doorway, her face framed by porch light, half shadow, half concern. Her lips trembled before she even spoke. "Tell me you're not walking down a road you can't come back from." I wanted to laugh, but my throat was too tight. I need you with me, I said, each word heavy like a chain being locked shut. She stepped closer, conflict written in the set of her jaw. Loyalty pulled her in, fear pushed her back. After a long silence, she nodded. It wasn't agreement, not really. It was surrender to a bond we both knew could break us. She wasn't built for vengeance, but she was built for me. That was enough. I covered my desk with fragments of Ethan's life, piecing together the man he had become. Photographs of him at corporate events, polished in suits, smiling like a man who had never known consequence. Articles praising his business rise. A list of names he had shaken hands with, every one of them fooled by his perfect facade. To the world, he was success. To me, he was rot wearing a smile. I ran my finger across his picture, not with admiration, but with contempt. Ethan hadn't changed. He had evolved, like a predator learning to hide its claws until the right moment. I whispered, "I'll tear away the mask." For the first time I felt closer to him than ever. It made me sick. The deeper I dug, the clearer it became. Ethan had built himself into a fortress. Money, influence, a web of people too blind or too scared to question him. Every photo I found showed him confident, unshaken, raising glasses to victories that weren't his to claim. His arrogance was painted across every frame, every smirk, every headline. And yet, that arrogance was his weakness. He thought the past was dead, buried along with the boy he broke. But the past had claws, and it had come back in the shape of me. I whispered, "You should have finished me when you had the chance." It was more than a threat. It was a promise written in fire. I started small, moving like a shadow on the edge of Ethan's world. At night I stalked the alleys near his office, listening to whispers that drifted from careless mouths. Every rumor became a weapon in my hands. I was a ghost they didn't see but felt. Sarah stood beside me one evening, her eyes flicking with fear. She said, "This isn't the boy I grew up with." I didn't look at her. My voice was iron when I replied, "That boy died years ago." Marcus's warnings gnawed at me in silence. He wanted me to stop, to remember my humanity. But I wasn't human anymore. I was rage given form, and rage had patience. Shadows don't rush. They wait, they tighten, they suffocate. And I was ready to suffocate Ethan's perfect world until it shattered. Inside Ethan's tower, the laughter was loud, but hollow. He raised glasses with men who thought him noble, their smiles blind to the rot beneath his skin. He looked powerful, but I saw him for what he was, a liar, a coward hiding behind glass walls. My eyes tracked every twitch, every flicker of unease when whispers of my name surfaced in conversation. For a heartbeat, the mask slipped, and I saw the boy who once ruled me with fists and cruelty. He tried to cover it with a laugh, but fear lingers in the corners of the eyes. He hadn't forgotten me. He never would. The more polished he became, the more fragile he looked. His empire was glass, and I was the stone. Marcus grabbed my arm after training, sweat dripping from his brow. His voice was sharp, almost pleading. "Revenge is a poison, James. It will eat you until nothing's left." I stared back, fists clenched, chest still heaving. "It already has, Marcus. I'm just letting it finish." His face fell, shadows deepening the lines carved by his own regrets. He had walked this path. I could see it in his eyes. He was me once, hungry for blood, convinced that vengeance would heal. But his silence told me the truth. It hadn't. Still, his sorrow didn't sway me. His story was his. Mine was carved by Ethan, and it would end with Ethan. I turned from him, fists still raw from the bag, blood mixing with sweat. I wasn't afraid of the poison. I was the poison. Sarah stood in my apartment, eyes wet with frustration. "You're not the James I know," she whispered, voice trembling. Her words stabbed deeper than Ethan's fists ever had. I wanted to reach for her, to beg her not to leave, but the fire inside me smothered softer instincts. If I stop now, I told her, then he wins again. She shook her head, tears streaking her cheeks. Maybe he already has. For a moment, silence pressed down, heavy as stone. Her loyalty was breaking, splintering under the weight of my rage. But even as her love cracked, I couldn't let go. The darkness had me by the throat, and the thought of surrender felt worse than death. I first saw Daniel outside the gym, a shadow carved from steel. He didn't move much, didn't need to. His silence screamed louder than threats. Ethan's enforcer. His weapon. The message was clear. Ethan was done laughing. My chest tightened as our eyes met. He didn't sneer, didn't gloat. Just stared with the cold detachment of a man who knew violence the way others knew breathing. No words passed. But in that silence, war was declared. For the first time, I felt the full weight of what was coming. Ethan wasn't sending whispers anymore. He was sending fists. And I welcomed it. Marcus's warnings lived in my skull like thunder, each word a scar reminding me of what I was becoming. "You're building a cage for yourself," he had said. And he was right. Every plan I sketched, every map I pinned, every line I crossed was another bar sealing me in. My desk had become a battlefield of memories and strategies, photographs of Ethan smiling in his suit, articles celebrating his rise, receipts of his lies. I stared at them until the edges blurred, whispering, "You won't laugh again." The truth was simple. Fear had died in me long ago, but hunger remained. A hunger to dismantle the monster who had haunted me, brick by brick, breath by breath. Sarah's voice trembled as she sat across the table, her hands gripping the mug like it was the last piece of warmth in the world. "You're slipping away, James," she said, her tone almost pleading. I looked up, my eyes sharp, voice hard. "This is the only way forward." The silence that followed was louder than any scream. She stayed because loyalty chained her here, but I could see it, the fear in her eyes. Not fear of Ethan. Fear of me. I hated it, but I couldn't stop. "If I don't do this," I whispered, "then he wins. And I can't let him win." She shook her head, her lips trembling, but said nothing. The silence was a verdict I didn't want to face. The first strike wasn't fists or fury. It was whispers. A rumor planted where it would hurt most. Ethan's partners began doubting him, eyes narrowing, questions asked in shadows. "Can we trust him?" they murmured. One thread pulled, then another, until his empire began to tremble. I watched from a distance, invisible, and savored it. This wasn't revenge yet. This was pressure. A slow poison seeping into his perfect facade. But with every small victory, I felt a shift inside me. It wasn't justice anymore. It was power. And the taste of power was dangerous, addictive, a drug I couldn't let go. Marcus's voice carried the weight of decades when he cornered me after training. "You think you're winning, but you're losing yourself," he said, sweat gleaming on his forehead. My fists clenched, adrenaline still burning through me. "Maybe myself isn't worth saving," I shot back, my voice like a blade. For a moment I saw it. Sorrow in his eyes, the kind that only comes from seeing your own mistakes reborn in someone else. He whispered, almost to himself, "That's what I once told myself too." The words froze me, if only for a heartbeat. Was I just repeating his story? My chest tightened, but pride forced me forward. I couldn't be him. I wouldn't. Yet his ghost clung to me whether I admitted it or not. That night, the city's cold air bit into my skin, but inside I burned hotter than fire. The trap was ready, every piece placed, the jaws open and waiting. Ethan had no idea the storm was already around him. As I walked past rain-slick shop windows, my reflection stared back at me. Unrecognizable. My eyes were hollow, my jaw carved by obsession, my posture heavy with purpose. "One step more," I whispered. With those words, I crossed a line. Justice had been my excuse. Revenge had been my mask. But the truth was raw and terrifying. I wasn't fighting to balance the scales anymore. I was fighting because destruction was all I had left, and it was too late to turn back. The room smelled of dust and ink as I rifled through Ethan's private files. My pulse thundered as I pulled out a letter folded with care, edges yellowed with time. It was no ordinary document. It was personal, written in a hand I didn't recognize but felt strangely connected to. I expected evidence of corruption, something to drag him into ruin. Instead, I found a thread to my past, to wounds I thought were random cruelty. My eyes darted over the words, each line heavier than the last. Ethan's torment hadn't been aimless. It had been chosen, targeted. He knew things about my family, truths buried long before I could ask questions. My hands trembled so hard the page crinkled, my breath shallow as if the paper itself was choking me. The room spun with the weight of realization. My vengeance wasn't born from chance. It had been written in ink long before blood was spilled. This isn't just revenge, I muttered to myself. It's destiny, and it terrifies me. Sarah listened as I read the letter aloud, my voice unsteady but burning with anger. Each word reshaped the battlefield inside me. She pressed a hand to her mouth, whispering, "James, this changes everything." Her eyes searched mine, desperate for hope. But hope was a language I no longer spoke. I slammed the paper on the table, my voice sharp. "No, this means he deserves worse than I ever imagined." Sarah flinched at the venom in my tone. I had wanted her to see me as strong, righteous, justified. Instead, she saw a man consumed by rage, shaped by scars he refused to let heal. She stepped back slowly, as if space could shield her from the storm inside me. Fear replaced the loyalty in her eyes, fear not of Ethan, but of me. And for the first time, I realized vengeance had twisted me into something even she could no longer recognize. At the gala, Ethan's mask cracked. The polished glass of his confidence shattered in front of strangers, though he tried to hide it behind a half-smile. My presence cut through his charm like a blade through silk. His hands shook as he held his glass, eyes darting nervously, pupils shrinking at the sight of me. I had dreamed of this moment, the bully exposed, stripped of his armor, vulnerable in the place he felt most powerful. I stepped closer, whispering sharp enough for only him to hear. "Remember me now." He faltered, a bead of sweat rolling down his temple. And then his words came, slow, heavy, trembling with something I hadn't expected. "You don't know the whole story." My rage flickered into confusion. I wanted to laugh, to hit him, to destroy him, but those words clung to me like chains. Maybe he was bluffing, but the doubt pierced me, leaving me unsteady. When I showed Marcus the letter, his reaction was a storm barely contained. He snatched it from my hand, scanning the words with eyes that seemed to dim with every line. He slammed it down, voice booming like thunder. "You think this will fix you? You think vengeance ends with blood? It doesn't. It ends with truth. And truth will break you faster than hate ever could." His chest heaved, shoulders shaking not with anger but with grief. I met his stare, fists clenched so hard my nails bit into my palms. "I don't care about truth anymore. I care about making him choke on the ashes of what he built." For the first time, Marcus didn't argue. He simply exhaled, his voice a whisper carved in sorrow. "That's exactly what I once told myself too." The words hit like a blade, slicing deeper than Ethan ever had. His silence wasn't weakness. It was recognition. The revelation slammed into me like a storm. Ethan wasn't only a tormentor. He had been a gatekeeper of secrets buried in my family's past. His cruelty hadn't been random sadism. It had been armor, a desperate attempt to control the truth. His words echoed, "You were never meant to know." My breath caught, chest heavy as if the world itself had conspired to twist my pain into something bigger. For years, I saw him as a monster, but now he was something worse, a coward hiding behind brutality. My rage surged, but it wasn't simple anymore. This wasn't just revenge for childhood scars. It was justice for a story stolen from me, for a life rewritten in lies. Ethan smirked weakly through his fear, whispering, "You were always meant to be broken, James." My fists tightened. I realized I wasn't standing at the end of a road. I was standing at the edge of a revelation that could consume everything I thought I knew about who I was. The city was silent as I walked into the warehouse, the air thick with rust and dust. Ethan waited, his smirk replaced with something colder. Daniel stood at his side, silent as a statue. For years I had dreamed of this moment, and now it was here, heavy with inevitability. My voice cut the silence. "This ends tonight." Ethan's laugh was hollow. "You think you're strong enough now? You're still that boy, James." My fists clenched. I wasn't a boy anymore. I was everything he had made me, and everything he feared. Daniel moved first, stepping into the flickering light. His presence was a wall of violence, a reminder that Ethan never fought his own battles. My heart pounded, but I didn't flinch. He studied me, eyes hard, then glanced at Ethan. Something flickered there, doubt, maybe guilt. Ethan barked, "Finish him," but Daniel hesitated. The air crackled with silence, the weight of his decision stretching the moment into eternity. For the first time I saw Ethan's control begin to unravel. Power built on fear was crumbling, and I was ready to strike. Sarah's voice broke through the darkness. She had followed me here, her eyes wide with terror. "James, stop this before you lose yourself." Her words sliced into me, sharper than Ethan's cruelty ever had. For a moment, I faltered, torn between the fire inside me and the only person who still believed in who I could be. Ethan saw it too, and his smirk returned, sensing weakness. He said, "She'll leave you, James, just like everyone else." My rage flared, burning away doubt. I stepped forward, ready to end it, no matter the cost. The first blow landed with the force of every memory I carried. My fists weren't just flesh and bone. They were years of humiliation turned into steel. Ethan stumbled, shock flashing across his face. No enforcers, no allies, just him and me, locked in the war he started. He spat blood, sneering, "You think this makes you strong? It makes you pathetic." I drove forward again, my fury consuming hesitation. Each strike was a release, each bruise on his face a fragment of my stolen childhood reclaimed. The storm had arrived, and it was unstoppable. Ethan lay beaten, gasping on the concrete, his mask shattered. But as I stood over him, chest heaving, I realized vengeance hadn't filled the void. Marcus's warning thundered in my head, Sarah's tears burned in my sight. Ethan whispered, "Now you're just like me." The words pierced deeper than any wound. I had dreamed of this moment for years, but victory felt hollow, poisoned. The fire that had driven me flickered uncertainly, replaced by the question of who I had become. And in that silence, I faced my darkest truth. The warehouse was silent now, except for Ethan's ragged breathing. My fists hung heavy at my sides, trembling not from weakness, but from the weight of what I had done. Sarah's voice cracked, "James, this isn't you." For a moment, I wanted to believe her. But the truth pressed against my chest like a blade. Ethan groaned, his smirk gone, his power shattered. I had won. Yet victory felt hollow, a shadow that swallowed every ounce of fire I thought would set me free. Revenge hadn't healed me. It had only carved me deeper. Marcus arrived, his footsteps echoing like judgment. He looked at Ethan, broken on the ground, then at me, and I saw it. The same haunted expression he wore years ago. He didn't need to speak, but he did. "Now you know the cost." My chest tightened, rage and sorrow colliding until I could barely breathe. He wasn't gloating, wasn't angry. He was mourning me. And in that look, I realized I had become the very thing I swore I never would. Another man consumed by vengeance, unable to tell if I had won, or if I had lost everything. Sarah reached for my arm, her eyes red from tears. "Leave this behind, James, please." Her words pierced me deeper than Ethan's fists ever had. My chest ached as I looked at her, torn between the darkness I had embraced and the fragile thread of hope she still offered. Ethan whispered, broken but defiant, "She'll leave you too. They always do." I wanted to silence him forever, but instead I looked at Sarah, her trembling hands, her stubborn hope. And in that moment, I realized the choice wasn't about Ethan anymore. It was about me. I stepped back from Ethan, chest heaving. The fight was over, but the war inside me raged on. He would never stop being the scar on my soul, but killing him wouldn't erase the past. Sarah whispered, "Come with me," and for the first time I listened. I turned away, leaving Ethan broken but alive, the taste of revenge bitter in my mouth. Victory wasn't the closure I thought it would be. It was emptiness. And yet, walking out into the cold night, I felt something fragile flicker inside, the possibility of being more than what he made me. The night air cut sharp as I stepped outside, Sarah at my side. Behind us, the warehouse sank into silence, swallowing Ethan's broken laughter. I whispered, "It's over," but I knew it wasn't. Revenge had given me nothing but another scar. Yet in the quiet, with Sarah's hand gripping mine, I felt something Ethan could never take: choice. The past was written in blood, but the future was mine to claim. I glanced at her, the faintest trace of a smile tugging at my lips. For the first time, I let the silence answer. And it was enough.